Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I am back again today doing another video, and the subject of today's video is going to be a little bit different. I'll be veering off of my normal subjects of the NBA. I'll actually be talking about the NFL today. Yes, pro football, not pro basketball. It's a big switch up for me, I know. Usually I'm all about the NBA. And I am still all about the NBA, and I will still be doing tons of NBA videos. But today, I just wanted to talk about the NFL a little bit. I am a huge fan of the NFL as well. I don't do much of that on here, but I am a big fan of the NFL. Not quite as high as the NBA, but actually a very huge, and it is a competition. I'd say I am always monitoring what's going on in the NFL, and I keep a close eye to the off-season moves. I pay attention every week during the season. I watch the highlights of every single game. I watch the playoffs, blah, blah, blah. So I am very into the NFL, and I have done a few previous NFL videos on my channel, but today I'm doing my first one in a while. So if you're clicking on, don't be afraid. This is still me, my channel, but we're just doing something a little bit different. So today I am going to be ranking all 32 starting quarterbacks for next season and going from 32 up to number 1. If there's a guy on this list who you're saying, wait, I didn't know he played for them or he's starting for them, I too got some surprises when I had to go through this list and look at who each team starter was going to be because I was a little bit surprised. And I really want to stress here this is not whatsoever a set in stone list. This list is very fluid. I struggled a lot coming up with it, not because I didn't really know much about the players, but more so because so many guys once I feel like once you get out of the top 10, so many guys are just so similar, and not similar in their play style, but similar in their value, I think, and similar in certain ways. And I especially struggled with a lot of guys who are just like game managers. So I'll give you a quick example here. And like a guy like Dak Prescott, he was a really hard guy to rank in here because he's a really good game manager, but I don't know like would I start my team with him versus a guy like Nick Foles? I don't know. It's a conversation to be had because I don't know which guy has more straight up pure talent. Um, and so that was a big factor in a lot of this. So I guess I should preface a big factor in a lot of this was I asked myself, would I rather have this guy or this guy? And whatever the answer was, that's how I put them above or below each other. And it wasn't, I was trying to not factor in for like team situation. So like let's say a great quarterback is stuck on a terrible team. I wasn't trying to think like, oh well, team success should be a sole factor, and so like Tom Brady should be number one. That's not how I was trying to rank this. I was trying to rank like if I was starting a team and I could have this quarterback or this quarterback, which one would I take? So that's how I did these rankings. And again, one of the hardest parts to me was that like your offensive coordinator is a huge factor in your quarterback success. Like the schemes that you run, the plays that you run, if they fit your quarterback, they're going to drastically impact his on field production. And it's not just like in other sports like baseball, it's just basically pure talent. Basketball, for a large part, it's pure talent. Coaching has a small factor to do with it, but it's basically talent. Whereas in football, a coordinator can make a very poor quarterback look amazing, and a bad coordinator can make a good quarterback look underwhelming. So if you disagree with me, I totally understand. It's a very fluid list. But without further ado, I feel like that's a very elongated introduction. Let's get into it. I won't be talking a ton about each individual quarterback. Some guys I'll go through faster than others, and there's sort of tiers to this thing in that like the bottom seven are sort of in a group together, then the middle eight, then the top middle eight, and then like the top 10 are all those are sort of like grouped together in certain ways. So I'll kind of tell you when we're getting into a range of dudes. Um, Starting at the worst quarter, I think the worst starting quarterback going into next season, I would say it's Eli Manning. Basically, I just think Eli Manning is pretty much over the hill. I think that that game about 2 years ago where they had Geno Smith start over him, I think that that was a sign that not that Eli's washed up, but just that he shouldn't be starting on a team that's trying to contend. If anything, he should go to a team that's going to rebuild and they don't have any quarterback solutions, and so they have him for like 1 year before they draft a quarterback, sort of thing. But I think the Giants will probably start Eli for some of the season. He'll play poorly, and then they'll bring on Daniel Jones to start. Kind of like the Ravens last year with Joe Flacco and Lamar Jackson. I think that's going to happen in New York this year. So Eli Manning at 32. At 31, Andy Dalton. Here's an example of a guy who can look a lot better or a lot worse based on system and coordinator. On his best days, he's a poor man's Alex Smith. On his worst days, he is a poor man's Case Keenum. That's really all I have to say about that. He doesn't really boast anything particularly awesome. He doesn't have great arm strength. He has very average to mediocre mobility. He does have a really good tool to use in AJ Green, but he just is not going to win you games. He's a game manager and a mediocre one at that. Next, I have Josh Rosen, who has more arm strength than either of the two guys before him, and he's just super raw, is why I have him this far down. I'd like to see some more proven good wins out of him. You know, last year on Arizona, they did nothing, and this year on Miami, I expect them to be like a 4-win team. So we'll just have to maybe see him develop a lot more this year, and we'll see where he goes after that. Next, at 29, I have Kyler Murray, who I think will be better than all these guys, and I'm sort of giving him the benefit of the doubt based on being the number one pick, which I know doesn't guarantee anything, but I think it is. There's a certain amount of clout to being the number one pick. I also really like his mobility, but I think he will take a lot of licks in his rookie year, and I think he will struggle quite a bit compared to years going forward. So I have Kyler Murray at my 29 spot. 28, I have a guy that I brought up a little while ago, and that is Case Keenum. Case Keenum is not a starting quarterback in the NFL, to be really honest. He's the best backup in the NFL, but he really should not be starting. He is starting for the Redskins. If you are unaware, they acquired him during the offseason because the Broncos didn't need him anymore, and Alex Smith is going to be out for the foreseeable future. So Case Keenum is our starter in Washington. If Case does struggle, I could see them going to Dwayne Haskins midseason, but I think to start the season they'll go with Case Keenum. Next, I have Joe Flacco of the now for the first time ever of the Denver Broncos. So I don't know why Denver went after Joe Flacco. I don't think he's that I have him here ranked one above Case Keenum. But I don't think he brings anything particularly better. He has a bigger arm than Case Keenum does. He has a lot less mobility though, and I think he's just sort of in the Eli Manning bracket. He's just a guy who's past his prime. I am a huge Joe Flacco fan. If you don't know, I am a huge Ravens fan in general. So yes, I have always been a huge Joe Flacco fan. I supported them though when they started Lamar over him last year. I think he still has something to offer, sort of as a backup and a really good veteran. He would be great on Arizona, honestly, this year as a mentor to Kyler Murray. Or I would have even liked him coming back to Baltimore as a backup to Lamar Jackson. Um, a guy that just shouldn't really be starting, but if he is going to start, he reminds me of Jay Cutler on Miami. A guy that can still give you something, but just wouldn't be starting on a playoff contending team, really. Okay, next. So I think that's sort of like the first round, so to speak. So that's quarterbacks 27 to 32. That's basically your. I wouldn't start them. I just wouldn't choose to start them in any scenario. Basically, the bottom of the barrel. Nothing that great. Next, let's see here. So 26, I have Josh Allen. He can scramble, that's for sure. He has good legs. I like that. He has a decent arm. Could be better, could be worse, sort of thing. Plays on an offense that's very poor. So we'll just sort of have to see how he develops. I feel like a lot's going to be expected out of him on a very poor Buffalo offense, and we'll just have to see how he fares with that. But I think there's definitely a lot of room for improvement. Next, let's see here. 25, I have Sam Darnold. Very poor statistics in his rookie season for what I thought he would be. I think he threw it was something like 19 touchdowns to 17 interceptions, so he was very interception happy. I've heard a lot of people call him the next Carson Wentz. I don't know if he's that. He doesn't have as much mobility as Carson Wentz so far. He's a little bit more stocky, so we'll have to see about that. But I think he has a promising upside, and you got to remember some of these really good quarterbacks, like Peyton Manning, actually had a very bad rookie year if you go back and look. And I think, not saying that Sam Darnold's the next Peyton Manning, but I think that guys can improve a lot in their sophomore year once they get acclimated to the NFL more. So I have faith in Sam Darnold that he will improve. Let's see here. Next, then, at 24, I have Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, he's basically failed Tampa Bay as the number one pick. He has not come through. Um, he's very bulky for what he should be, really, for his size. He should be a lot smaller of a dude. He's very chunky, honestly. He reminds me a lot, if you guys remember a dude from the mid 2000s, he reminds me a lot of Byron Leftwich. A dude who's really stocky, and whenever he played, my thoughts were always like, this guy should be a lot more mobile than he is. That's my thoughts with Jameis Winston. He's a guy that he seems like he'd be like a game winner kind of quarterback where you can just give him the ball and let him create. He's honestly more of a game manager than people think. He will sometimes win his team the game, but more often he's kind of a boomer bust guy actually. Now that I scratch that, I was thinking game manager because he's kind of a neutral quarterback, but honestly, he's much more of a boomer bust in that like he makes a lot of good plays but makes a lot of mistakes. Like I feel like he has lots of games where he'll throw 4 touchdowns but then 4 interceptions, stuff like that. But like he kind of neutralizes his both good and bad. So he manages a game from that perspective, which is kind of an unorthodox way to come at that. Okay, so next let's see here. So I think we're down to 23 here, which would be Marcus Mariota. Decent. I'm not huge on him. Just like kind of another just guy. Like he has some mobility. He has a little bit of an arm. He can scramble. He can do a little bit of everything, but he does nothing really good. That's what Marcus Mariota is. I'm gonna start speeding up here a little bit just because I noticed I'm already 12 minutes in and I'm only like still in the 20s. So next is Lamar Jackson, really young. I like his mobility. We'll have to see how the offense adjusts to having a lot worse of a defense because my poor Baltimore Ravens lost a lot of their starting defenders. And so I believe that Lamar will be okay, but I think he will slightly regress from last year, actually. Next, Jimmy Garoppolo, honestly a relative unknown at this point. He started like a collective five. He hasn't even started like 10 games in his career yet, so I don't know what to think of him really. But in the games he has played, he's played pretty decent. But because of his limited exposure, I'm still ranking him relatively low. I think technically I have him here at 21. So yeah, Jimmy Garoppolo at 21. At 20, Mitch Trubisky. Now here we've got a classic game manager. He He's decent. He can win you some games. He can be the reason you lose some others. He's got some scramble ability. I like him on the run. I like him out of the pocket. His arm strength is mediocre, but I like his scramble ability. And they've got enough tools on that Bears offense that they can hold it together, and the Bears defense can win them games. So we've got Trubisky at 20. 19, Nick Foles. I'm ranking him here a lot like I'm ranking Garoppolo at 21. Nick Foles, decent quarterback, won a Super Bowl MVP. He has played really well sometimes, but never forget that Nick Foles was on the Rams and was a terrible quarterback on the Rams after he had thrown 27 touchdowns to 2 interceptions with the Eagles. The next year he played for the Rams and was awful. Don't forget that. That's something a lot of people like to sweep under the rug. I don't think Nick Foles is a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback, even though he did make a Pro Bowl with the Eagles in 2013. I don't think he was worth the money that the Jaguars gave him. I don't think he's the key to them making the playoffs and being a great team. I think Nick Foles will go down as the greatest backup quarterback of all time, but I don't think he should get the kind of money he got. And I don't. I think he's a starter on a really bad team in the NFL. Maybe the Jaguars, because they're really desperate, they're willing to try him, and he could totally prove me wrong. But I just don't. He's got some decent tools, but again, this dude's never even started a full season for a team, so I don't know why so many people have bought into him. Okay, now we're on to 18, which is Dak Prescott. A game manager, I like his experience more than I like Trubisky's. I think he's more familiar with his offense than Trubisky is. I think he's a steady presence, and uh, I just overall a game manager, but he's like a slightly worse version of Alex Smith to me. He makes the right decisions, but he can't be like the dude that wins you a game. Next, I have Baker Mayfield. I'm not as high on Baker as a lot of other people are. I think he's still going to be sporadic. I think he's going to regress in season 2. I think that, yes, having Odell will help, but I think he will feel a lot of heat between Odell and Jarvis both yelling to get their touches. I think that this is a team where at first we're going to say they'll win the division, they'll go to the AFC Championship, blah, blah, blah. But I could see them finishing the season 8-8, missing the playoffs, and people will say, Baker threw 20 touchdowns to 17 interceptions. What happened? And we'll just have to say, well, he regressed. People got used to him. Once people had film on him, they could play him a different way. I think he'll go through the regular old sophomore slumps, but that's not to say that he won't bounce back eventually. Okay, here. Next, we have at 16, Derek Carr. Derek Carr, decent. Again, kind of an unproven dude. He had the one season in Oakland where he played like the 13, 14 games, and he was like a Pro Bowler, a fringe MVP candidate type guy. But again, I don't know. I don't think he can win a Super Bowl with a team unless they have like the number one defense in the NFL. I think he could kind of win you some games, but at the same time he can lose you some games too. Good arm strength though. Love his arm strength. I've realized that I've kind of abandoned this whole like label as we go along thing, but just to be clear, so once we got past the Josh Allen phase, the Sam Darnold to Nick Foles was kind of like the I believe in them. I think they'll be good, but they're also very unproven sort of thing. That was that phase. And then we get to the Dak Prescott phase, and we're in the middle of that one right now. But Sam Darnold through Nick Foles is basically like I like them, but they're very unproven. Okay, so we had Derek Carr at 16. Now on to 15, Deshaun Watson. I really like Deshaun. I like his mobility a lot. I think he's got a lot of arm strength. I think he makes the right decisions. I think I love that he has DeAndre Hopkins on his team. I wish they had one other slightly better receiver. I don't really love Will Fuller necessarily. I think he's actually off the team now, if I remember correctly. But I just wish they had one other good receiver to go along with him, because although DeAndre is good, people can double team him, and then the Texans' offense struggles a bit more. So I wish they had one more guy to help Deshaun. Next, I have Kirk Cousins. I don't know. As a Minnesotan, Kirk Cousins is both very frustrating, but yet you hold out a little bit of hope for him. Puts up a lot of stats, but not that good, I feel like. If you want an NBA analogy, I feel like he's the Gordon Hayward pre-injury Gordon Hayward. Pre-injury Gordon Hayward. He was like a fringe all-star or a fringe Pro Bowler like Kirk Cousins. And he gets paid a ton of money, but everyone says he got overpaid, which is true. I feel like that's Kirk Cousins. Puts up some good numbers sometimes, not really proven to be clutch whatsoever, but gets paid a ton. Will win you some games that don't really matter, and will lose you games that do matter. Next, Matthew Stafford. Basically a carbon copy of what I just said for Kirk Cousins, but then just add that he has a way stronger arm than Kirk Cousins does, and he can bomb it farther downfield than Kirk Cousins does. There you go. Same exact description for Stafford. So that finishes my next section, which was Dak Prescott through Matthew Stafford, which I think I'm going to label as they can win you some important games, but they'll lose you a lot of important games too. Next, we're going into Jared Goff, who I have next. I believe this would be 12. Jared Goff at 12. So here's a guy who he's good, but I think he's a big product of Sean McVay's offense. And I think that if you put 25 different guys on this offense with this offensive line protecting them, and the weapons of Brandon Cooks and Todd Gurley and Cooper Kupp and a few of those other guys, Robert Woods, don't forget about him. I think that a lot of guys would do just as well or slightly worse than Jared Goff. I think He is a very good quarterback, but a product of playing in really nice weather all year round and having maybe the best offensive head coach currently in the NFL, outside of Andy Reid. Okay, so at 11, I have Cam Newton, who, yes, you may think this is really high for Cam Newton, but when he's been bad, it's because he's been injured. And if you don't know that, you should study up on Cam Newton's injury history. But when he's been healthy, he's been a very good quarterback. I still say I think that we have rarely seen performances like what he put up in his MVP season in 2015. I was a big fan of his play that season. I still think he has that in him somewhere. Frankly, the Panthers don't have many weapons whatsoever, and they do need some more. Um, but I like Cam. I've got him at number 11. At number 10, I've got Carson Wentz, a dude who has a ton of talent, put in a great season in Philly 2 years ago. Last year, he was still injured when he was trying to play, so I don't hold that against him. I think he'll have a bounce back season, and I believe in him, is the most important thing to say, probably. Next, I have a dude at number 9 who doesn't get the credit he deserves, I think, a lot of times, but is very good and I think deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame. Philip Rivers. To all those out there saying Philip Rivers has never had any team success, the one year that he had a good supporting cast on these Chargers, the one year that they had LaDainian Tomlinson and everyone was healthy, they went 12-4 and made the AFC Championship game and were beat by the Patriots, who were, I believe, like also 12-4 or 13-3 or something, and everyone loses to the Patriots, so it's not that big of a deal that Philip Rivers did it. And then last year, again, or actually, scratch that, they were 14-2 that season that I'm forgetting about. And then last year, he again has a good defense finally and has some weapons around him. They go 12-4 and make the second round and again lose to the Patriots. So again, guys, Philip Rivers is a guy who the reason that he isn't as widely respected is because he's playing in a smaller market when he was in San Diego, and he also hasn't had the supporting cast a lot of his career. Number 8, Big Ben, all reliable. I think he's a dude that can kind of do some of everything. He's got a huge arm. He can scramble really well. He can read defenses pretty well. He is sloppy sometimes, and he's gotten a little less mobile as he's aged, but he's still in one of the best offenses, and he's a big reason why it's one of the best offenses. Next, Matt Ryan. Maybe people are saying at number 7 this is too high, maybe too low. I don't know. He's kind of a hard dude to rank because he is an MVP, but he can be somewhat inconsistent. But I like Matt Ryan. I feel like with Julio, he's going to still be productive. He doesn't have the strongest arm. He doesn't really have much mobility, but he makes the right decisions a lot of the time. So for that reason, I have him at 7. At 6, I have Drew Brees. I think Drew Brees did regress a little bit at the end of last season. If you look over their first 10 games, they averaged 37 points. The Saints did per game. Over their last 6 games, they averaged 20. If you look at Drew Brees, he wasn't gunning it nearly as much last season. The Saints were a running team last season. That's not to say that Drew Brees is bad or anything. He still makes the right decisions almost all the time. He just doesn't have the immense arm strength he used to, and he can't just chuck it like he did for about 10 years there. At 5, I have Tom Brady. Basically, same sort of story that I just told about Drew Brees. I think his arm strength is fading, but he makes the right decision all the time, and he just won a Super Bowl, so I have to put him above Drew Brees. At number 4, Russell Wilson, a dude who carried Seattle last year. He makes all the right decisions. He has great mobility. He has good arm strength, not amazing, but good. I like him. I think if he had a few more weapons around him, we'd be putting him at number 2 instead of what I've got him at number 4. So that's how I feel about Russell Wilson. Also, how do I say this? So Seattle's kind of gone from a running team to a passing team, but if they had a slightly stronger running presence currently, I think that would actually help him a ton, in that it would alleviate pressure from defensive backs and stuff. So because now they're like a passing team, so they're dialing in more, I think, for pass defense when they play other teams. The other teams are dialing in more on pass defense. So it's tampering. He's still great, but if they had the running game still a lot stronger, he would be even better. At 3rd, I have Aaron Rodgers. He's coming back from a season that was less than what we expect out of Aaron Rodgers. He's still on his best day, the best quarterback in the NFL, but I just need to see a bounce back season from him to have him up to number 1 again. But he totally has the ability to. He just is coming off of a slightly worse year, so I have him a little bit lower this year. Number 2, Andrew Luck. I cannot express how much I am indifferent about Andrew Luck, honestly, but I have to recognize that he is just pure talent. The Colts seemed dead in the water last year when they, I think, started something like not 0-6, but they were something like 2-6 or something, and then they finished like 10-6. And he came back from injury, was slow those first 6 games, but once he got it rolling, and they made it to the playoffs, and they did well. And I wish they would have gotten Le'Veon Bell or Antonio Brown to add to the offensive weapons on this team, but they didn't. But Andrew Luck is a dude that he is the reason his team wins games, flat out. No disrespect to the rest of the team, but Andrew Luck is the reason that his team wins games. Uh, Case closed. And number 1, the MVP from last year, the Chiefs man, Patrick Mahomes. Historic season, historic stats. I know it's not all about that. They did have team success too, though, 12-4. I think he might regress a little bit, but I think I think at the worst he'll put up 40 touchdowns and 20 interceptions this year, which is still a borderline MVP season. So there you have it, guys. My 32 through 1. Let's see here. The Jared Goff to about Phillip Rivers is like dudes who are Pro Bowl worthy but not Super Bowl MVP worthy, and then the Ben Roethlisberger through Patrick Mahomes is dudes who on any given day can just give you fits and are unstoppable. So there you have it, guys. Those are my quarterback my quarterback rankings, and sort of thoughts on them going into next year. Leave me your thoughts below if you have any. Hope you enjoyed the video and have a good day. Bye.